Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the OK Grognard Show. It is Wednesday, July 15th, 2020, 9:30 a.m. Central in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And it's Wednesday, so it's campaign discussion day. I'm going to talk today a little bit about NPCs of Note, non-player characters in your campaigns. What is an NPC of note? Well, somebody runs into somebody in town and says, which way to the general store? And they say, it's over there, and points to a building. I would have to say that is not an NPC of note. If, however, they go into that general store and they start to have discussions with the shopkeep, and it goes beyond how much is this and how much is that, I think you start to get into NPC of note territory. I have been playing since 74, so I'm used to a lot of winging it early on. Who are they going to talk to? I'm a sandbox DM, so it's hard to say who is going to fall under the scrutiny of being an NPC of note or just a plain old person on the street. Certainly, when you create a setting, you have certain individuals that are going to be important to that setting, some that are going to have information that you know is going to be useful to the player characters, and so you sort of put them out there in a way that means they will probably be encountered at some point. If you're starting everybody off in a tavern, there's a good chance that the barkeep, perhaps some of the servers in that tavern, perhaps some of the other patrons are going to be NPCs of a note. People that you're pretty sure are going to be encountered, are going to be questioned, are going to be interrogated, are going to be relied upon for certain services or goods that you know the player characters are going to need either immediately or very soon within the campaign. If you've ever run a campaign, then you know you can only create so much, and sooner or later player characters are probably going to stray away from the places that you've created, the places that you expected them to go. And at least for a portion of a game session, you're going to have to play off the cuff. You're going to have to be an improv master rather than a dungeon master or a game master, which is to say, you're going to have to make some stuff up on the fly. That's actually pretty easy to do for, I think, most people, because once you realize that no matter what you make up, it's got to work on some level. It may not work the way you expect it to, but players will probably buy in to whatever it is you come up with, because they're looking for information. All they have is what is on their character sheet and what you tell them. You are, as a game master, the facilitator. You are their eyes and ears and nose, and you're their conduit to the setting that you've created. And the setting you created is what they are there to explore. So they've already bought into the premise that you have a world, whether it's well-defined or it's super random, and you just got a bunch of tables and you're rolling random situations and random events as things go. You know, any which way, they're at least initially happy to explore and try to figure things out come what may. It's important to be fairly consistent. You don't want to be predictable. But the great author Flannery O'Connor used to say that once you read a short story, when you get to the end, it should be, you should have a feeling that it was surprising but inevitable. In other words, it makes sense that it got to where it went. It might not be where you expected it to go, but you wouldn't cry foul unless, you know, if the butler does it in a mystery, but we haven't even learned about the butler existing at all in that fiction until the page before the mystery is solved, I think we'd be a little upset with the writing. And Death Angel Shadow, good morning. After a fashion, you are writing as you go. Now, granted, I'm a big believer that playing in an RPG is primarily a game. It's not really storytelling, in my opinion, because the story is a byproduct of what happens during the game. So, in that respect, storytelling with no sense of steering it in one direction or another. You can take actions, but because consequences can be random, we don't know where that story's going until the end. So you sprinkle your campaign with story elements, and some of those elements are NPCs of note. Individuals that are fleshed out at least to a point that they can be useful to the player characters in the course of the actions they take while playing the game. Well, you don't want every NPC of note to be leaning up against the side of a building wherever the player characters happen to walk, and an NPC just lean in there with a big question mark over his head. Ooh, I should ask him a question. Who are you? Where am I? What am I doing? Where do I go next? Nah, leave that kind of stuff up to the players through their characters to figure out. But if they ask information, just try to put yourself in the shoes of that NPC. What does that NPC actually know? If that NPC is a general store clerk, then they see other people come and go all day long. Perhaps they see adventurers coming and going all day long. Perhaps those adventurers, when they're in there, talk to one another, regardless of who's around. We've seen that more often than not. How often, if you're a GM and you're running a game, how often have you had to ask the players, are you saying that out loud? Admiral Stockdale. I don't think I know who Admiral Stockdale is. Stockdale, there's an Ibsen character in Enemy of the People named Stockdale, I believe. Two, right? Is the mayor and his brother both Stockdales? Or is that the doctor? What's Admiral Stockdale from? Death Angel Shadow. Bring me up to speed. Hey, Valixion. Am I saying that correct? I never know if I am. Let's face it, if the NPC is in the general store, is the general store clerk, he doesn't even know what the places of the stored goods are. Where do you keep the lanterns? Now they're over there next to the flasks of oil. Here, you need a light? He was the running mate of, oh, right. Okay, well, we won't get into politics here. I do remember who that was, though. The truth is, the store clerk can be completely ignorant. There's no reason why a store clerk has to know anything. You're absolutely right. And in that regard, you can certainly roll percentage dice whenever a question is asked. And if you decide your store clerk maybe knows 20% of what any individual might know, then you roll, and if you roll 20 or under, you've got an answer to that question. Now, you can also roll a separate percentage or a separate die and determine whether that information that NPC has is true. They could very well have a lot of information that they're willing to share, but perhaps they came by that information erroneously. Perhaps they misheard some people talking. Perhaps that NPC was fed misinformation as a way of creating some mystery around where the local ruins are and what's in them, and where a entrance to a dungeon below or some crypts might be within those ruins. Perhaps there's a whole setup there to try to create, to keep that entrance hidden so that nobody else can find it. One of the things, when we talk about NPCs, one of the things I like that came about in 3rd edition, and I'm a dyed-in-the-wool 1st edition guy when it comes to what I prefer to run, but I ran plenty of 3rd and plenty of 2nd and plenty of 5th, several campaigns of 5th edition. But one of the things that came out of 3rd edition, which they then got away from afterwards, were the NPC classes. NPC classes were weaker classes. I'm going to bring this over here, and let's just switch screens for a second. I don't know how easily this can be seen. Let's pop it up a little bit, make it bigger. All right, so we're over on dndsrd.net. We're looking at NPC classes. This is a 3.0/3.5, 3rd edition era anyway. There were 5 NPC classes, and they were the Adept, the Aristocrat, the Commoner, the Expert, and the Warrior. So, one of the reasons I appreciated it right out of the gate was I really enjoyed henchmen and hirelings in early D&D. And the idea of an NPC warrior class appealed to me. It was a lesser fighter who did not progress as swiftly as a regular fighter, had some rudimentary skills that would likely be taken: swimming, riding, jumping, intimidate, handle animal, right? So you could use that warrior as a teamster. These are caravan guards. These can climb, because usually strength is a prime requisite, right? They progressed and could gain in strength, and of course in their saving throws, not as swiftly as a regular fighter. But they had a D8 for hit points, and every time they went up a level, they could become stronger. So palace guards, let's say town gate guards might be first or second level, maybe a third level sergeant. Palace guards might be third, fourth, fifth level, depending on what sort of setting, the overall power of the setting might be. But at least you don't have a bunch of zero level guys standing around that are just cut down immediately. Expert was sort of your non-thief, non-rogue, in the case of 3rd edition. Skill monkey, right? So 10 skills, can choose any 10 skills. So particular skills would be tailored to the function of the NPC. You would have, it just said tailor, right? So there was a skill called profession parenthetical. And somebody could get better at that particular profession. Let's say it was profession tailor, profession leather worker, profession armorer, weaponsmith. And they could get better at that as they gained experience, however they gained experience. And overall, they could get better and better at what they do. And eventually they gain more skill points with every level, and so they become a better armorer, a better leather worker, whatever. You could get better products from them. Commoner was sort of the catch-all. With a D4, anything that wasn't an expert or a warrior would fall under commoner, or aristocrat, which would be anybody who was a noble or of birth and would have specific skills, whether it was diplomacy or survival, speak language, perform. So you could have entertainers who were that. An adept was probably the most complex of them. At a D6, it was essentially a acolyte, because they could gain divine spells, cure spells, bless, aid. A lot of these spells took longer to cast. Simple weapons and simple armor, or not proficient with any type of armor, nor with shields. They were a non-adventuring cleric type. You didn't have an NPC class that was a mirror of a magic user or a wizard. Oh, hey, Lexpired. Thank you very much. Nice of you to do that. Good to see you. Welcome to the chat this morning. We're just talking NPCs. One thing I did, and let's pop away from that for a minute. One of the things I did early on in during 3rd edition, because I was already creating some products, was to create something called culture classes. I'll show this off a little bit. Let's make it smaller. There we go. So a culture class was essentially an NPC class, but a little more refined. In this case, the county clergy was meant to be a little more than just a local cleric, more of a wandering cleric. I got rid of that summon familiar. I picked out spells that were a little more hands-on toward helping the populace. The idea was that they would wander from town to town, from place to place. I gave them light armor as a possibility since they weren't going to be tied to a village or a location necessarily. Henchmen and hirelings. Let's stack 2 miles, ready in action, pass a wooden pole, full distance in 6 seconds, sending it flying at Mach 2, launching the, what's in the local ruins, the ashen silhouette of players hit by the ultimate fire, right? So yeah, those are clues that people should be picking up on. When they do go to the ruins eventually, they should see what's left from previous adventuring parties, right? We never want to forget that if others have been there before you, there will likely be signs. So the culture class idea was kind of an expansion of the NPC class. It was meant to fill some gaps in the NPC world where we didn't want a full-fledged player character class being used as an NPC. Sometimes that was warranted. In 3rd edition, the way the game was balanced, certainly he went down in a dungeon and ran into a big boss. You wouldn't expect some aristocrat shaking his fist and sending his band of weak little warriors at you. You wanted, let's run into a magic user that was actually working their way toward lichdom. Let's ramp it up. I say magic user, I should say wizard if I'm talking 3rd edition, but you get the picture. So, open game license, good times. We could create all sorts of stuff like that. I think one of the ideal situations when creating NPCs is to determine first what sort of information you want out in the world, and then create a little list of the individuals who might have that information. I think it's important when creating NPCs to avoid making them unique as much as possible. If you have some information that you think the players will eventually be interested in gaining, some knowledge, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Make sure that multiple NPCs that would all have the opportunity to have gained that knowledge, any that have had, and it doesn't have to be all of that knowledge. Some could have some degrees of it. Oh, I heard this little bit. Oh yeah, I read a book on that subject and I know this much. I've been there and I've seen the place and I've talked to people that have been there too since I'd been there. We compared notes and here's what I know. So you can have several different levels of competency in various NPCs. And then once they're out there, it's up to the players to seek out that knowledge and figure out who they're going to talk to, and then make a sort of impression on that NPC that they're worthy of gaining this knowledge from them. They can coerce them, they can bribe them, they can just befriend them and be helpful to them, and they can strike up a relationship that's ongoing, or they can just meet someone in passing and make a good impression enough that that NPC will give them as much of that knowledge that they have. And again, let's not discount how often we there we go. Okay, I see how this works. Pride lion. Look at that. You know, it's so small, the emote, that it almost looks like a Kool-Aid pitcher. So here comes prideful Kool-Aid, huh? I guess that's all the flavors in one delicious pitcher. The NPCs, also you have to determine how trustworthy an NPC is going to be. You have to figure out not just how much information they have, but how much they're going to give and what the quality of that information is going to be. So there's your checklist for putting NPCs together. Any quick questions? I think we're just about done for the day. I've got a handful of things I got to get done. I've actually been up since pretty early doing laundry and pause due to scrolling. There we go. Just got done a whole bunch of laundry. Was over the laundromat's right near where that new TSR Dungeon Hobby Shop Museum is being put in, and I saw some of the guys said hello, working away already on that. So that's continuing apace. You might have seen some pictures on Facebook with Ernie running a game for a few of the faithful over there. Since they're getting it underway, I think they wanted to get a quick game in to christen the place. It's been years, right? It's been 40 years. That was, I think, the first Dungeon Hobby Shop before it moved over where Kilwins is. So, and that happened in 77 or 78. So we're talking 42, 43 years since thanks Lexfire, since a game of D&D was run in that place. And it was probably Ernie running his Dungeon Hobby Shop. So bookending 42, 43 years of that being a converted, going from being a store in the small offices of TSR before they moved down on Main Street. 42, 43 years of it being a residential place, 2 floors, couple of renters, families probably for the most part, and now being converted back into a commercial interest. So we'll see. They got a good head start, and certainly they've got time to get things going before they would need to be up and running, what with the state of the world and everything that's going on. Hey, thanks everybody. Thanks so much for following. Don't forget, if you're following, don't just be a lurker. Chime in on the stream chat while you're here on Twitch, because we will throw your name in. And you know what? Valexian, I don't have you in there this week yet, so let me put you in. We'll throw your name into a list that we keep each week, and we do a random person from each week. We'll get a little giveaway. It's not a contest. It's not a drawing. It's just something we do to people that are kind enough to follow and give us a little hello while they're around. If you're catching up on YouTube, by all means, subscribe to the channel. Give us a thumbs up, maybe, and a comment. Let us know what you think. We'd appreciate the feedback. And tomorrow will be what tomorrow is. So we will see you then. Thanks again. Have a good day.